Hey everyone, welcome back to Sarah's Vegan Kitchen. Today I've got 3 vegan-friendly Thanksgiving recipes to share with you. I'm gonna jump right in. The first recipe is for stuffing, which is my #1 favorite Thanksgiving dish of all time. So I always add tons of celery. I mince that nice and fine along with some white onion. And this time around, I'm also quartering some Brussels sprouts and cubing some butternut squash, tossing those with some olive oil, some salt, some pepper, and I'm roasting them until they're tender. Now for the bread, I've chopped up this multi-grain loaf. I let it sit out for a few hours so that it gets a little stale and it really soaks up our butter and our broth later. Now on the stove, I'm sauteing my celery, onion, and a good amount of minced garlic till they're nice and tender. Next, I'm pouring in some veggie broth and stirring in some poultry seasoning, which is just a blend of herbs like rosemary, thyme, sage, and marjoram. And I'm also adding a bit of fresh chopped sage. You can add any fresh herbs you like. Parsley would probably be good if you like it, but I happen to have this strange parsley aversion. So I'm tossing in my bread, stirring it until it soaks up all of the liquid, and then I'm stirring in my roasted veggies and also a handful of chopped green apples and some cranberries. My apples are raw here, but I would actually recommend roasting them with your veggies if you try this recipe. You can also add pumpkin seeds or pecans or walnuts if you'd like to, add a little bit of a crunch. Now we just finish our stuffing in the oven. If you saute everything in a cast iron pan or in a shallow Dutch oven, you can totally just pop that right into the oven, but I'm transferring mine to this nice wide shallow dish just so I can spread it out because I personally like my stuffing a little bit crispy on top. If you prefer yours more moist, wrap it in foil or put a lid on it before you bake it. The second dish is this green bean casserole. For our first step, you'll want to trim the ends off your beans, cut them in half, and boil them. I like to boil them just for a few minutes till they're bright green and nice and crisp, but you can cook them for longer if you'd like them soft, or you can even use frozen green beans that you just defrost. And when they're cooked, shock them in an ice bath so that they stop cooking. Now, I know those crispy fried onions you get at the store are borderline addictive, so you can use a can of those, but you can also make a lighter version by baking them. So here, I'm thinly slicing an entire white onion, then pour a bit of unsweetened plant milk into a bowl and whisk together some flour with onion powder, garlic powder, salt, and pepper. Dunk your onions in the milk and then dredge them in the flour and shake off any excess, and then you're going to transfer them to a lined baking tray, spread them out nice and thinly. Give them a bit of a spritz with cooking oil just to help them brown, and then you're gonna bake them until they're crispy. You'll give them a quick toss midway through just to keep the edges from burning. Now the classic recipe calls for canned cream of mushroom soup usually, but we're gonna make our own from scratch, so I'm prepping a lot of mushrooms, just rinsing them and slicing them thinly. And you know how I feel about garlic, so I'm also crushing a ton of garlic for the soup. Now we'll take a good amount of vegan butter and saute some chopped onions, our garlic, and our mushrooms to start that cream of mushroom soup. After those are soft, sprinkle on some all-purpose flour and cook it for a few minutes until it's golden brown. This is going to be a roux, it's going to thicken our soup. And don't worry if a little bit of the flour sticks to the pan at this point. Next, you're going to pour some white wine or veggie broth in. Use that to deglaze your pan and scrape off any brown bits from the bottom. Next, you'll pour in some plain plant milk. I used unsweetened plain cashew milk. You could also use cashew cream if you have some of that on hand, as well as a little bit more veggie broth. Stir until it comes to a boil and thickens. Add a pinch of nutmeg and some thyme or any of your favorite herbs, and then stir in your cooked green beans, heat those through, and then transfer it to a casserole dish. You're gonna top it with your crispy onions, and then just stick it back in the oven to make sure it's nice and piping hot, crisp up your onions a little bit more, and then it's ready to serve. The very last option is a lighter version of scalloped cheesy potatoes. So you're gonna start out by peeling and slicing your potatoes nice and thin. If you have a mandolin slicer, that could be really handy here. I'm holding my potatoes in cold water while I'm slicing them, just to keep them from turning brown. You can slice up some white onion as well if you'd like. I'd actually recommend being pretty generous with the white onion because this is one of my favorite parts of the dish and I wished that I had added more. But I'm just layering the onion on the bottom of a casserole dish, and then I'm arranging my potatoes, kind of standing up. You can also just stack them on top of each other, but I think this looks kind of cute. And then for our dairy-free cream sauce, you're gonna need some soaked cashews and some unsweetened plant milk. You're gonna throw that into a blender with some nutritional yeast, salt and pepper, onion and garlic powder, and then a squeeze of lemon just to give it a little bit of tartness. And you're also going to add a bit of cornstarch to thicken it up. Puree that until it's nice and smooth and pour it over your potatoes. Now, I didn't do this when I filmed, but I would actually recommend covering your dish with tinfoil or a lid when you put it in the oven, and then uncovering it during the last 10 or 15 minutes just to keep the dish a little bit more moist, keep the steam in there. And you can also add some vegan cheddar shreds during the last few minutes. Let those melt and bubble up and get a little bit crispy around the edges if you'd like to. And this one you want to give a couple minutes to cool before you serve it. So that is my vegan take on 3 classic Thanksgiving side dishes. Hope you enjoy this video. Let me know if you try out any of these recipes, and leave a comment down below. Let me know what you're bringing to your Thanksgiving this year, and I will see you in my next video.